command. Now, a ship was burning in port. The late call to the fire department had alerted the Navy. Men from the 3rd Naval District Intelligence Office at 90 Church Street in Lower Manhattan, where Haffenden kept his official office, were summoned to the scene. They jumped into yellow taxis and their own cars and headed north. But upon approach they were quickly stalled. Everyone from air wardens to sailors and auxiliary firemen was called to help with the fire and the hundreds of injuries being sustained at Pier 88. Busy Manhattan streets were quickly clogged with taxis and automobiles filled with first responders who arrived piecemeal. Vendors walked away from their stands, and though the temperature was just above freezing, a massive crowd of onlookers gathered at the end of West 48th Street. 1,500 firefighters who had received the late call filtered in and arrived at a scene of chaos. No one on Pier 88 had begun to fight the fire. New York fire hoses could not attach to the boat's original French fittings, and the ship's own firefighting systems were mostly out of service. The only help to contain the blaze came from the Hudson River, as firefighting ships nuzzled up against the port side and blasted water in high arcs onto Normandy's deck. New York City Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia arrived, and so did Admiral Adolphus Andrews, who was the commander of the 3rd Naval District. LaGuardia and Andrews looked on helplessly as a ship nearly 1,000 feet long, a full 100 feet longer than HMS Titanic, with 3 smokestacks so large that each could have swallowed the Holland Tunnel twice over, lit up the cold, rainy day. They watched as hundreds of men scrambled around on the pier that ran the length of the boat. They also saw sailors escaping from the ship on skinny ladders that swayed in the wind, and a few who fell helplessly into a sea that was so cold, large chunks of ice had formed on the surface. The New York Fire Department was tenacious, and after hours of fighting and nearly 300 casualties, and fortunately only 1 death, they successfully extinguished the blaze. In their zeal, however, they hurled so much water on board, about 6,000 tons, that it collected below decks and was causing the ship to become unstable. By nightfall, the ship was illuminated with spotlights, and it was clear that it was listing dangerously to port. Counter-flooding efforts were tried and failed as divers tried to open compartments underneath the ship. In the early hours of February 10, 1942, clattering sounds were heard in the massive ship. The lights were turned off, and the press was taken away, under orders from Admiral Andrews. Then suddenly, Normandy capsized to port, away from the pier, and slowly slid into a murky pool of mud, ice, and water. Listing 80 degrees and stuck, the ship was lost. It was a disaster for the Navy. One of the most important ships the United States had in the Atlantic Ocean was destroyed in a very public fashion. Overnight, a dense fog of soot settled as far away as Times Square, as low clouds trapped the smoke. The next day, the smoke was there to greet the tens of thousands of New Yorkers who went to Pier 88 to see the wrecked giant ship for themselves. Commander Haffenden, meanwhile, assigned some of his best men to investigate what happened. Prior to the fire, spy rings had already been identified in New York City by the Navy and the FBI, with most of them seeking information about ship movements. Without a doubt, there were more out there that had yet to be exposed. They may not have known what had caused the fire, but the men in B-3 section of ONI in the 3rd Naval District carried on as if the ship had been sabotaged by enemy spies. Whether it was sabotage